Hi everyone, this is Shelia Butler with Successful Women Talk. I want to say thanks for joining me today. We are the show that takes you behind the design, and today we are here with Sandy Jones-Kaminski. Now she is the Chief Connection Officer, and this I love the way she titles herself as that, at Bella Domain Media. So we're going to learn a little bit more about her story, and how she got started in business. So welcome, Sandy.
Thank you, Sheila. I'm happy to be here.
Well, thanks so much. So kind of the first question I ask everybody is, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you really did get started in business.
Okay, well, I am a Chicago gal, right? I was born and raised in Chicago in the Midwest, and I spent a good deal of my adult life there, and my beginnings in business were in what everyone's referring to now as big data, right? Business intelligence, and that was market research specifically. So I spent a lot of time in a startup, right? It was a startup that went public during my tenure there. I was really young, and it was an exciting experience, but that also gave me the bug then, right, to want to be an entrepreneur and to see these four men do this with just chutzpah and, you know, and because they were able to get money and go get people to invest in them and believe in their idea, I was just really, you know, in awe of that and thought that's something I want to do someday. And what I did then was I really focused my corporate career on rounding out my resume. I really wanted to experience working in all different areas of a company, right? I worked in the operational side, production, then I went into the analytical side, learning more about data analysis, and then I went into client-facing roles where I was an account manager and dealing with customers. And then I got into executive management, right? I moved to another company where I was a vice president, had a lot of responsibility, had a lot of people reporting to me. And that whole time, I was just always pointing myself in the direction to do this on my own someday. The only thing I didn't do, the only hat I didn't wear was like CFO, right? You know, an accounting, say. And that's okay, because that's something you can outsource, right? I mean,
absolutely.
Not numbers, but I just, you know, that's a whole different specialty, and I respect the training and the work those people have to do to stay on top of IRS law and all of that. So that wasn't for me. But I spent that whole time learning about business, trying to be grooming myself basically to be an entrepreneur. And then what happened was, so that was in Chicago, and then I came out to the San Francisco Bay Area in '96 it was, and I fell in love with this part of the country, and I fell in love with the redwood forests. And it's a long story, but I was here on a week-long vacation, and it moved me, and I was really intrigued by what was happening out here because I met some women on that vacation that were working in the technology industry, and I stayed in touch with them, and it turned out that they were from Michigan, which was interesting, more Midwest people, right? And it took me 2 years and a lot of work, and unfortunately my mom passed away during that time. And it was a time to sort of start over and to look at a new beginning. And what I did was I started looking for a job out here in San Francisco, which is where I am now. And I found a company that was working in the startup industry. And I found that company through a Business Week issue on Silicon Valley, right? This was sort of the end of '96. And on the front of that magazine were Steve Jobs and the guy from Cisco and all of these people from Intel and all the people that, you know, in the late '90s that were really starting to create that bubble, right? So I found this company. I flew myself out here using frequent flyer miles and rent-a-car points and all that. And I interviewed with 2 different companies, and I got both of those companies interested in me. But I chose the one that was going to enable me to work with 100 different startups as opposed to working for one startup, right? Because that was really what I was interested in, all those working with entrepreneurs and just helping people succeed in business. And I ended up being a managing director of a team that oversaw all of these startups and all of these entrepreneurs, their small businesses. So that was where I knew I solidified that bug and this desire to, you know, just help other people create business and grow their business. And that was a great ride, right? I had a great time during that bubble. I had no complaints. You know, it was super fun. And there were a lot of successful companies that still, you know, came out of that. There were I mean, there's too many to name, but a lot of them are still companies that are around that people know, but they were startups when we first started working with them. So then September 11th happened, right? I was doing some taking stock of my life, and I actually decided to go back to Chicago for a while. I knew I wasn't likely going to stay there, but I knew it was a good place to ground myself and reconnect with family. You know, my niece and nephew were getting into their teen years, and I knew it was going to be a good time to be around them and reconnect with business in that town, which was an interesting experiment because after having been in the Bay Area, where people speak almost an entirely different language to technology and business dealings and deals and partnerships and business development and all of those things. And I went back there. The good news, the sidetrack of this is that I met my husband when I moved back, right?
Ah.
The reason I was happy to leave the Bay Area was because it was a challenge being single there, not because of the different lifestyle choices, but because there were just too many opportunities for people to focus on their work, right? That was a big part of when you're in the Bay Area. A lot of people are focused on their career. They're in their 30s. They're not looking to get married yet or get settled down. That's when you're really in your high income earning and getting on your path to do that. So I'm getting off on this tangent, but I think it's important and hear how people, you know, go about creating business for them.
Sure.
Right. And so I went back to Chicago, found that that really wasn't a good fit for me professionally, right? And my then husband, we got married and we decided we wanted to go somewhere fresh together, start over. And we ended up choosing Seattle. It was one of the places where we had an opportunity that was going to relocate us. So we went there for a while. And that was an interesting experiment, right? It's not a place that's for everyone. There's lots of interesting things happening there, but it's also a really challenging town for outsiders, right? There's this whole phenomenon called the Seattle freeze. You may have seen that in my book about this in terms of what made me want. And I wanted to help other people that were having difficulty with that phenomenon. And also because of all of this activity in my career, you can tell, like, I have gone and had to reinvent myself, right? I have gone places where I had to build an entire life. I had to build a network. I had to build professional networks, social networks, all of that. And I had to do that even when I moved back to Chicago to some extent because everything had changed, right? I was gone almost 5 years, so all of the people I knew had either moved on or were in different businesses or lifestyles. So I had to really start over again and do that, build a network, meet people, make contacts. So had to do that in Seattle as well, right? So that's part of what led me then to becoming, starting my own business. I really started my business when I was still in San Francisco in 2002. But when I went back to Chicago, I did consulting as well as I took a couple corporate jobs just to, you know, especially when you're planning a wedding. I was like, okay, we need some serious cash flow. So I went back into corporate, which is an option that a lot of people, you know, do take, and that's okay. And it gives you time to sort of fine tune or tweak your other business model, your own business model, and think about what you're going to do when you get back to it. So that's what I did. And in Seattle, I worked for various clients that were mostly startups that were trying to grow, and they were out of the infancy stage, but they were, you know, starting to need to professionalize a little bit because that's sort of where my strengths are, taking corporate tactics and strategies and applying them to smaller businesses because it all applies. I mean, there's lots that you can do that a bigger company might do. You think you can't do it without, because you don't have the resources, but today with social media and all of these things that are available to us, everyone can use some of the same tactics and strategies that bigger companies do.
So let me ask you, when you say that you took your skill sets and helped them, what exactly did you help them do? So with your consulting, what did you help like when you took those startups, what did you help them do?
So they varied. I mean, one of the things that my roles when I was in San Francisco and then even when I took a job in Chicago were business development, right? So business development is somewhere between sales and marketing. And it's very much focused on collaborations and partnerships and working with other companies to figure out how you can both, that whole idea that, rising tides floats all the boats, right? So how can you work with another company or another business owner and figure out how you can collaborate so that you're both going to draw new clients, or maybe you're going to share clients, right? You're going to be able to offer them different services that the other company isn't, that you can, but to do it together and approach it as a unified sort of, the old days it was joint ventures or whatever it might be, but today a lot of people don't go that formally with it. They're more project-based or product-based, right? You collaborate on a product. So what I would do in those situations and for these different clients was I was approaching people outside of the company and setting up, negotiating deals, basically, talking about how our different companies could work together, how we could share resources. And a lot of it was really strategic deal making, right? I mean, it's figuring out revenue shares, doing the things you would do. Like if I were to start referring business to you, you to me, okay, I'll give you 20%, I'll give you $1 per user. I mean, whatever it might be. It was negotiating deals and looking at how then they were going to market and promote those opportunities, right? Because that's the other thing is you can't just set up a deal with somebody and hope they're going to sell your product the way you want them to. You need to train them and you need to empower them with tools or resources to do that. So that all has to be thought through, and you have to look at the marketing materials and web pages or whatever for the presentation of the offer that you're doing with them. So that was a big bulk of the client work I did, was deals that were, fairly high level in terms of revenue for each company. But then I also did a lot of work where I was working with smaller businesses, women-owned businesses, many of them, helping them come up with their business plans, right? Because so many women-owned businesses, we start our business because we have a response or we have a demand that comes to us, and we just start doing it. And then, we get our P&Ls and we get an accountant and we start going. We've never really said, okay, what is my plan? What is my goal? What am I aiming for? And we all know those things need to be fluid, right? They can't be set in stone. But the idea is to sort of set your sights on something so that you know which way to turn the ship, right? Which way. And what's important, too, is the idea of knowing what to say no to, right? I think that's a huge challenge for a lot of small business owners, is because you're just eager to grow and you want to have new collaborators, whatever. But sometimes there's times where you just need to say, no, that's not right for me, or that's not right for my business. Right. Helping them come up with what those lists look like, right? When an opportunity comes along, you hit it against that list. Is this a woman-owned business? Yes or no? Is this under 5 million? Yes or no? Is this in this technology sector? Yes or no? Is this a product? Yes or no? Right? So what are those things? Helping people stay true to what their sweet spot is, right? That's the sales that we all talk about. It's what's the sweet spot.
Well, let me ask you this. So, but pretty much what you did all your early career was create a foundation to go out, and what it sounds like to me is become a terrific networker and figure out how to make connections between people. So that's like your foundation, right? So let's talk about, tell me what do you feel is the most important thing about networking, connecting with other people, even if they're your competitors? What is the importance there?
Well, I'm so glad you said that, because I don't usually have this much time. You've given us a lot of time to talk today. So usually I do that whole speech much more succinctly and explain that I got so into networking because of my recognizing what that phenomenon was, that my ability to connect with people and immediately sort of find a common ground or a connection to determine whether there was an opportunity there or not. And the reality is that what I learned is that it's always all about the other person, right? That's key to networking. And it's how you approach it in a business development scenario or partnership scenario. You don't go in there going, well, we're fabulous and you should work with us because Inc. 500 said this. And you don't do any of that. It all has to be about who you're approaching and what is it that they do and what is it that they're looking for, and what would they gain by collaborating with you, right? Well, so the same thing applies when you're networking, right? When you're meeting people, the idea is to learn about them and what are they doing at that event, or, you know, in this chat room, or whatever it might be, or in this interview. You know, what is it that what brought them there, right? That's one of my things I talk about when you go to a networking event, is that most people always have a reason for going to something, whether it's a conference, a trade show, a networking event. You go because there's something you need or want. Otherwise, you'd stay home and you'd watch Thomas the Tank Engine with your son because he's been sick, or you would, you know, watch Dancing with the Stars, or you would go to a soccer game. Whatever it is, you would be doing something else. So there's something motivating you, and that's your job when you network, is to find out why other people are there. Like, what's going on in their world? What do they need help with right now? Right? Making that assumption that there is a need and making it okay for them to just talk about it, right? Because that's one of the things that we all recognize, is sometimes people are very nervous and they're reluctant networkers because they don't want to be schmoozy, or they don't want to feel like they've got their hand out. And I don't recommend either of those.
And do you find that more with women? Because I think I see a lot of times with women, we have trouble asking, right? We have trouble asking for permission, or we have trouble asking for help. So almost networking sometimes is a little bit difficult, although we're a little bit chatty, which is helpful. But the problem with asking sometimes makes it a little more challenging with networking from time to time.
Well, I think that's a very accurate statement, but and I don't think that's sort of in women's nature. And I don't think we can change that, right? Again, what I preach is this idea that make it easy for the other person. So I'm a woman, you're a woman. If I make it easy for you, if I stop worrying about myself and what I need to ask and just focus on you, the conversation organically happens. And then because I've asked you what you need help with, you answer me. You know, there's the window, it's open. She asked me what I need help with, and I can say, well, I'm looking for women entrepreneurs that have products that are looking for help with their sales strategy, right? We all need to come together and say, we're going to make it easy for the other person, because you can't just blurt it out. It's not appropriate. And that's part of what motivated me to write my book too, was this whole idea of being out at these events and watching people that were having such a tough time and doing crazy things like that. That I would watch them, here they are, they spent money on a babysitter, parking, blah, blah, and they came to the event and they're just alienating almost every person they encounter. And it was just sad to me. And I wanted to find a way to help these people. But you don't have to approach it that way. Just relax. Get to know the other person, right? That's the key, is to just focus on getting to know these other people.
It's about relationships. The way I see it, I think social media is the same way. I think they're just tools, and I think you mentioned this in your book, and we'll talk about this in just a second, but they're just tools to help you build relationships.
Right.
And you can't let the tools get in the way, because relationships are what make the world go round. So let's talk about your book. I'm at a networking event, now what? That was a great read. No fluff. It's just to the point. So let's talk about this a bit. What prompted you to write this, other than what you just said? And give us some big tips and nuggets out of this book.
So what prompted me to write it was what we just talked about, was watching other people, hitting a certain point in my career where this was such second nature to me, and also recognizing that other people that I met who had had similar career paths as me also weren't having trouble with it. And sort of recognizing that, this is something that when you come up in the world in marketing or business development or sales, you develop those skills, you're trained, right? And that's one of the things I realized, that so many people don't have any training for networking skills. You train on management skills, leadership skills, right? There's classes for all those things, but there's nothing on networking. And that's a huge, vital part of being successful as a professional or as an entrepreneur. So I thought, okay, and so many people would say to me, well, it's easy for you. And I'm like, but it could be easy for you too. Right? It's not that hard. So I had so many people say, you should write a book. You should write something. And it started with somebody asking me to write a white paper. And I wrote a white paper called The 12 Rules of Professional Networking. 12 Rules of Networking for HR Professionals, right? They had an HR niche, a content site. And I sat down and wrote these things out, and they were all my pet peeves, right? It was kind of like all the things that I knew people were doing that were just crazy. And it was like, oh, don't do that. No, don't do that. That won't help. So I wrote these things, and what happened was 1,200 downloads later, I realized, ooh, I'm here. Like, this is a topic that people want more content on. So I ended up connecting with a publisher and then going about writing my little opus, and that's what did that. But also then it was that Seattle freeze phenomenon too, right? Where being in a town or being in an environment where it's not as easy. Like, one of the things that is so true in the Bay Area, and this may be true where you are too, is people just are wired to be more collaborative. They're just more open, and they're just much more collaborative in terms of their DNA, right? It's just a different way that people are, and I was witnessing people having trouble with that there, that breaking through that freeze phenomenon that they talk about, which anyone can Google that, right? That's something, there's a lot of information online about that. And that was the other reason, because I was still in Seattle, and I really wanted to help so many people that I was meeting do that. So the book then became something that I started speaking about, and people would invite me to come and talk about it and ask questions. And then I found that I really enjoyed that, and I've been doing that mostly, right? So the book itself is something that I write blog posts, right, where I add stuff. Because then when I started doing all these speaking gigs, people would ask me questions, and I'd be like, ooh, that should have been in the book. But that was something else. So I started writing blog posts about those things. So anyway, that's how that all evolved. But it was also recognizing that these can be learned skills.
And what I like is you said you saw a need. So you actually went to an event, and you saw some people were, it's very painful for you to watch them isolate themselves or not be able to network and communicate and get the most benefit from that. So let me ask you, if we have people that are going to a networking event, or like some of the people that watch our show and download the show are actually mompreneurs that own product-based businesses, and they attend a lot of trade shows. Now, whether they're showing product there, maybe they're communicating with potential customers and or competitors around them. So what can you do if you're at a trade event or you're at a networking event? What are some of the nuggets that you could give somebody for really getting the most out of that event?
Well, it's funny. The first thing that popped in my mind was, back to this, it's about the other person. So, you go to this trade show and you are ready, you've got your elevator pitch memorized, like you're ready to launch into why you're there. But the reality is that you have to make your efforts about learning about why the other mompreneurs are there. Ask them questions first. Offer help to them first if you can, right? And that whole idea that it will naturally happen that then they say to you, well, Shelia, tell me about your product. And that's also because women are sort of wired that way. Like, we will do that automatically. But men will do that too, because they get the game. They know how it works, that's how it works. You listen to me, I listen to you. Let me hear what you need. Let me make a note on the back of your business card. Let me take up a sample product. Whatever it is, if you initiate that has to be your mission. Because if you go there just waiting for people to ask, you will be disappointed and you'll be sad and you won't have a good time. That's the other thing I always say to people. It's like, you'll have a better time if you are making an effort to find out about the other people and what they're doing more. And you will then be able to tell your story. And if that person can't immediately help you per se, they're going to remember you and tell the person at the booth next door when there's a break and you're not there. They're going to say, oh, well, you should talk to Shelia Butler. She has this. Right. So that happens all the time. And most of us, when I say this, I'm sure people are going to think about that and go, oh, yeah, that's true. That's how I met that woman from, Dove Chocolate or whatever it is. Like, you'll realize that a lot of this stuff has happened to you organically in your networking or your events. But the idea is to make that conscious effort, right? And I actually have these, and what I call all of this is I call this a pay-it-forward approach to networking, right? That's kind of how I talk about it in my presentations, and in the book I even have a chapter at the end about this. And what I say is that this idea of asking people what their need is, what they're working on, what do they need help with, right? Those are the questions to start a conversation. And if that seems too difficult, right, to just launch into that, I always have people preface by saying, so Sheila, what brought you to Mod Fest this year, right? Like ask the person about what you have in common. You're both at this trade show. Like, why this year? Do you come every year? Use the venue, use the event as your starting point. That just, what made you come to this year? Do you come every year? Are you coming next year? I mean, whatever it might be. Who are you looking forward to hearing speak this year, right? Use that common ground that you already have. And then you can get into so tell me more about your product. Like who's interested in your product? Who should I keep an eye out for you, right? Those sorts of things. And the idea is to think about, is there someone that that would benefit by meeting or knowing that person, right? Those are all the things that could be going through your head as you're listening to people and you're trying to tune into what they're talking about. Could this person provide info or resources to someone else I know? And then, has this person impressed me so much that I want to get to know them better? And I want to make sure that I, find out more about them and follow up and connect. And that's where I talk about social media and social tools really coming into play. I think that, I'm a huge social media person, but I also understand how they fit into my business and how I think they should fit into businesses. And I use them very often for research, again, back to my research days, before events or conferences. I'll look up who's going to be there. I'll look at the speakers. I'll figure out are there people I want to meet. And you can do a lot of that on social media now because a lot of the conferences even have the names of people who are going to be there. You can look for their Twitter handles. You can start following there. There's all these things you can do. So it's pre and post, right? So to me then too, the social media comes in after those conferences. Use the social media to solidify some of those connections. Almost all of it was great to meet you. Thanks for making time to chat with me are in LinkedIn. I use LinkedIn to do that. I use their business card that I've gotten. I use the email off the business card. I say, put in their email address. I say, Sheila, it was so great to meet you at CES this year. I can't wait to see when your product comes out. Let's link so we can stay connected.
I love that.
Right? So it's like, boom. And there it's fresh. You stay. And that way, too, if that person decides to move on or change, what they're doing, you're going to be able to stay in touch with them, even though that business card they had might be defunct, because everybody keeps their LinkedIn profiles up to date and has their emails in there. So again, follow them on Twitter, use all those tools to solidify that connection that you made in person. So the other thing I want to just say about these conferences is, this is big today, is put this thing down, right? Do not resist that urge to wander around the halls or the aisles on your phone. If you need to check your phone or your email, go off to the side. Do it somewhere where you have privacy, because when you do this, you're blocking that.
It tells somebody I'm too busy for you right now.
Right.
You know what I love is everything that you've said, and I keep finding this in most of the conversations that I have with women, is that it's all about networking, right? And us being successful is all about networking and building relationships. And it all goes back, and it reminds me of back in the old days where you lived in a really small town, you had a butcher and you had a doctor and you had all the local people, and you helped each other, and you didn't use cell phones and you didn't have social media. You taught and you built relationships, and you all prospered because of that. And it's all sort of the same thing. We're in a world now that we have all these tools that help us do that, but I don't think we can forget that it's really all about relationships.
Right. And there's nothing like that in-person or live human exchange, whether it's on the phone, Skype, like we're doing. There's something different about that. And that is the piece that has to be, we have to be more mindful of that piece, that it's easy to get caught up in the electronic aspects of it. And like I said, I'm a big fan and I use it, but I obviously don't ignore the other part. I wrote a book about focusing on in-person events, right? That what you do when you're there, and that it is about, everything that I'm describing is about building a relationship.
Right.
It's not about being a hit and run, right? That's one of my chapters, is don't be a hit and run. Like, you can't just expect to go meet these people and have a quick conversation, link with them on LinkedIn, and then sell them, right? You can't then start spamming them with emails and think they're going to buy your product, right? You haven't built a relationship, or you're not going to get them to refer people to you. You know, that's one of my biggest shockers, is that people expect people to just, I met you at an event, you're a CPA, and all of a sudden I'm just going to start referring people to you. I don't know you yet. I don't know if you are trustworthy. I don't know if you're good. I need to develop a trust and understanding of you and how you work and get to know you so that I can refer you with confidence. And
we're women. We don't really want, we want to chat on the first date. We don't always want to kiss on the first date. We want to build a relationship. It's the same way in business.
Exactly. And that's what I always say. I use that dating analogy a lot when I talk. And I talk about that idea, you know, like you have to date a lot of people to find the right one. Well, it's the same thing, that every person you meet when you're networking they're not going to be Prince Charming for you per se. They are just someone else that you've met that you get to know, and you maybe don't know how you can help each other right now. But as long as you don't alienate them and kind of dismiss them or don't follow up with them, you might find out that in 6 months, they become the person you need, because now they live next door to the head of whatever for some big company. You know what I mean? It's like, I always say to people, you can never dismiss anyone, because you never know what's going to happen. It's, you know, pay it forward, be kind to everyone, be open, you know, focus on building relationships with people, because I have so many stories, and I write about this in the book too, of people that, you know, they don't think much of the person that they just met, but they were nice and they were, you know, attentive and whatever. And then they find out 2 weeks later that, well, you know, my neighbor is the head of HR at Microsoft, and, you know, I told them about you and your book, and they would love you to come and speak. Are you interested in it? And you're like, what? You know, I mean, stuff like that happens all the time. And,
you know, it goes back to that thing of don't judge a book by its cover. You know, I think you just have to give people the benefit of the doubt. Learn who they are. You're not going to know whether you want to date somebody or marry somebody on the first date. Get to know people, develop a relationship, and see how you can help each other out. That's what makes the world go round. And to be real honest, that is the foundation for business, in my opinion.
No, you're absolutely right. I totally agree. And again, you know, that whole idea about not waiting for other people to initiate conversations too, right? I'm just thinking about your original question about at conferences and trade shows. You know, it's sometimes some of us are a little shy or a little reluctant, but what I've found that is if people have or feel empowered and have these questions that they know that they can ask, they get more confident. And the more practice you have with talking to strangers, right? I always tell people, you know, practice talking to strangers that are sort of inconsequential in your life, right? Like I practice talking up the checker at Macy's, right? Yep. Just, so how's your day going, right? Just that question, just asking somebody who's standing on their feet for 4 hours a shift, how's your day going? And just getting those conversations to happen in your life so you're more comfortable with them. You know, I tell the story about the Starbucks drive-through, right? That my husband, who's, of course, the exact opposite of me, right? He's an artist, he's shy, he's quiet. You know, our first year of marriage was when we were in Seattle, and of course, there's Starbucks everywhere. So we would go through the drive-through, and he would never engage with that person behind the, you know, the voice by the drive-through. And when we went through this whole thing where I would be like, why didn't you say anything? Like, she said, how are you today? And you just launched into your drink order. And he's like, I did, you know, and he was totally oblivious to it. I'm like, yeah, I'm like, you should at least, you know, acknowledge that she asked you a question. And he was like, oh, okay, whatever. So the next time we go, we get to the window, and they're like, hi, welcome to Starbucks. How are you doing today? Good. Can I have a grande latte?
He's trying. He's baby stepping.
Right, exactly. It was all baby steps. Well, now, of course, I can't get him to shut up, right? Because I'm up constantly. But it's great because it was a great way for him to practice. And now, you know, 7 years later, he's much better and less nervous when we go to events or parties or barbecues. he's just more comfortable. And it's all from practicing with strangers is what my thing is. So.
I agree 100%. And it's, I have a common, I care about people. So, and I'm from Texas, of course. I have a, Southern hospitality. I always ask, and I'm a little offended when people don't respond. But the point is that I too continue to ask and care and connect, and it makes it easier. And then when I go to an event or I go to speak, I just speak as if they're just like the person that I met yesterday on the street. It's not a big deal, and I think it breaks the ice for the person that's a little bit uncomfortable with it too.
Right, that's right, and that's where the other, I talk about this phenomenon of how do you, because this happens at conferences and trade shows, right? Like, how do you approach these groups? Because a lot of times that's what's hard is that, you go to these things and you want to, it's a group that's already been going to this trade show for years and they all know each other, and, you kind of want to break into that circle of people chatting, and this whole idea that you have to learn to put yourself out there a little bit, right? And your biggest tool is your smile, is what I always talk about. That's
your biggest accessory. It's your best accessory.
Biggest asset is your smile, and
that's right.
Have to get comfortable. And I say that all the time. Like, that's one of my last slides in my presentations is smile. Like, why are you not smiling when you're at these things? Who would want to approach somebody stern, freaked out look on their face? It's not going to happen then, right? You have to get yourself comfortable and just try and breathe and get at ease and smile. But the point is, you have to use your smile to get into these groups and to introduce yourself and to say, hi, I'm Sandy. May I join you, right? It's a phrase that people just need to practice and practice and practice. But on the flip side, I talk about this, that what we could all do as women and men is when we see somebody trying to approach, be the person to welcome them in. When you see that happening, don't just stand there and watch.
I love that.
Be the person to welcome them and be the person to, include other people into these things. Lead by example. That's all we can do is try and be that person, right? Initiate the conversations, welcome other people. And I always talk about too, when you're solo, find the other solo people. You will have a friend for life.
That's a good, you're paying it forward to that person.
Right.
I love that.
Get it. That's going to be one of your best connections. It happens every time.
That is terrific advice. Well, I think it's important because it is scary when you're there by yourself. And so if you pay it forward, someone probably paid it forward to you, you pay it forward back to them, and then your networking circle will continue to grow.
That's right.
Hey, listen, this has been terrific. If someone wanted to connect with you, where would you want me to send them? And where do they get this great little book?
Thank you. So that great little book is on Amazon. It's on iTunes. You can get it in Kindle form. And my website is belladomain.com. And I'm on Twitter. SandyJK is my Twitter handle. I've got a Facebook page where I share a lot of networking content, right? What I do is I curate content on networking events and articles, right? I don't just post my own stuff when I come across, you do that too, right? You share articles on Twitter. I do that on my Facebook page as well as Twitter. So my Facebook page is facebook.com networking know-how.
Okay.
Great place to just go and, especially before an event. I was saying this to Sheila earlier, when you need to sort of get psyched up to go, or look for some articles or check out the book and just, get some tips and get charged up to go meet some new people and make some new quality relationships for your business.
Absolutely. And that makes the world go round and will help our businesses grow. And the more we can work together and collaborate, the better off we'll all be.
That's right.
Girl power.
Yay.
Sandy, this has been a pleasure. I appreciate your time and I appreciate your experience and sharing your story with us. I love your networking. I love your pay it forward concept. And check out her website if you haven't, and check out the book as well. Thanks, Sandy.
Thanks, Sheila.
Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Okay, that's our show, and thanks again for tuning in. Hey, I have a huge favor. I'd like for you to join us over at www.successfulwomentalk.com. Join our email list, and on that list, you'll be a VIP. You'll be receiving all of our newest updates, newest interviews, our newsletter, and any tips and tricks we have for organizing your business and getting raving fans and customers that actually just sing your praises. So again, thanks again for tuning in. tuning in. Check us out next week for another episode of SuccessfulWomenTalk.com. Thanks, guys.